The trading post on Kepler 442b buzzed with its usual mixture of languages, species, and commerce. Ambassador Sarah Chen moved through the crowded marketplace with practiced ease, her diplomatic credentials gleaming on her chest. She had spent 3 years on this frontier world, building bridges between humanity and the dozens of alien species that called this place home. The Korthak delegation had arrived that morning, their massive transport ships casting shadows over the settlement. They were a proud warrior race, standing nearly 8 feet tall with thick, scaled hide and 4 powerful arms. Their reputation preceded them. They had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade, always through shows of overwhelming force. Sarah watched from across the plaza as the Korthak soldiers marched in perfect formation, their plasma rifles gleaming in the alien sun. At their head walked General Thrakmor, a scarred veteran whose victories were legendary throughout this sector of space. The other species in the marketplace, the peaceful Zalani traders, the insectoid Vresh merchants, the gaseous Nethys diplomats, all stepped aside as the Korthak approached. "They're here for the Accords," whispered Dr. Martinez, Sarah's scientific advisor, as he joined her near a fruit vendor's stall. 23 species are supposed to sign the Mutual Defense Treaty today. Sarah nodded, keeping her expression neutral even as unease crawled up her spine. The Galactic Defense Accords were meant to create a unified front against the expanding Korthak Empire. If enough worlds banded together, they might have a chance at maintaining their independence. But that was exactly what the Korthak were here to prevent. "Ambassador Chen!" a synthesized voice called out behind them. Sarah turned to see Consul Vex 9 of the Mechanical Collective approaching, his chrome surface reflecting the marketplace's colorful awnings. "The Korthak have requested an immediate audience with all treaty signatories." "Requested or demanded?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer from the tension in Vex 9's optical sensors. General Thrakmor was quite insistent. The Great Hall of the trading post had been converted into a makeshift diplomatic chamber. Representatives from 23 worlds sat in a wide circle, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. The Korthak stood in the center, a display of military might that dwarfed everyone else present. General Thrakmor's voice rumbled through the chamber's translation systems as he spoke. "Fellow sentients, you gather here today to discuss resistance to the natural order. The Korthak Empire brings peace through strength, prosperity through order. These accords you plan to sign will only bring suffering to your peoples." Ambassador Yiril of the Zalani delegation, her crystalline form shimmering with nervous energy, spoke up. "General, we seek only to maintain our sovereignty. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us." Thrakmor's laugh was like gravel in a cement mixer. "Sovereignty is earned through strength. Your worlds are weak, divided, defenseless. You speak of unity, but you know nothing of true power." Sarah stood slowly, drawing the attention of the room. "General Thrakmor, with respect, strength comes in many forms. The species gathered here have survived and thrived for millennia through cooperation, innovation, and mutual support. That's not weakness. That's wisdom." The Korthak general's eyes fixed on her, and Sarah felt the weight of his predatory gaze. Around the chamber, she could sense the other delegates' surprise at her directness. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 30 years ago. They were often seen as young and naive by the older civilizations. "Ah, the human speaks," Thrakmor said, his tone carrying casual disdain. "Your species fascinates me, Ambassador. So small, so fragile, yet you spread across the galaxy like a disease. Tell me, what makes you think your words carry any weight here?" Sarah felt the familiar spark of determination that had carried her through years of difficult negotiations. Because words have power, General. They can build bridges or tear them down. They can inspire hope or spread fear. And right now, your words are only proving why these accords are necessary. The tension in the room ratcheted higher. The other delegates watched nervously as Thrackmore took a step closer to Sarah. Even from across the circle, she could feel the heat radiating from his massive frame. You mistake boldness for wisdom, little human. Perhaps a demonstration is in order. What happened next would be replayed on news feeds across the galaxy for months to come. Thrackmore drew his sidearm, a massive plasma pistol that looked like it could punch through starship armor. The other delegates scrambled backward, their various forms of panic creating chaos in the chamber. Sarah didn't move. She stood perfectly still, meeting the general's gaze with steady eyes, even as the weapon's barrel lined up with her chest. "You see?" Thrackmore announced to the room. "This is the courage of your would-be allies. When faced with true power, they flee like prey animals, leaving the weak to die alone." "I'm not alone," Sarah said quietly, her voice somehow carrying across the suddenly silent chamber. "And I'm not running." "No," the general agreed. "You're not. You're dying." The plasma bolt lit up the chamber with blue-white fire. It struck Sarah center mass, the superheated energy tearing through her diplomatic uniform and burning through flesh and bone. She collapsed instantly, her body crumpling to the polished floor as smoke rose from the fatal wound. For a moment, the chamber was completely silent, except for the hum of the cooling plasma weapon. "Let this be a lesson to you all," Thrackmore announced, holstering his weapon. "This is what happens to those who oppose the natural order. Your unity is a fiction. When death comes calling, you stand alone." The other delegates remained frozen, staring at Sarah's still form. Some wept according to their species' customs. Others radiated rage or fear through their natural emissions. But none moved to help or to challenge the Korthak general. "The signing ceremony is canceled," Thrackmore continued. "You have 48 hours to evacuate this system before the Korthak fleet arrives to claim it. Anyone remaining will be considered a hostile combatant." As the Korthak soldiers filed out of the chamber, their heavy boots echoing off the walls, the other delegates slowly began to disperse. The dream of unified resistance had died with the human ambassador, and they all knew it. Or so they thought. What none of them noticed was the small device on Sarah's collar, still blinking with a steady red light. Her personal communicator was still active, still transmitting on a frequency that would reach the edge of the system in exactly 7 minutes and 18 seconds. And what was waiting at the edge of the system would change everything. Captain Marcus Webb of the UES Retribution sat in the command chair of humanity's newest heavy cruiser, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the main view screen. His ship was one of 12 vessels in the Human Defense Fleet's 3rd Expeditionary Force, currently on a routine patrol of the outer colonies. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Commander Torres from the communications station, "we're receiving an emergency signal from Ambassador Chen's personal beacon." Webb's blood ran cold. Sarah Chen was his younger sister, though protocol demanded he never show favoritism in his official capacity. She had specifically requested assignment to Kepler 442b despite the dangers, believing that humanity needed to establish strong diplomatic ties in that sector. "Put it through." The signal was broken, full of static and interference from the long-range transmission. But the automated distress protocol was clear. Ambassador Chen's life signs had ceased, and her personal beacon had detected hostile alien weapons fire. "Sir," Torres continued, her voice tight with barely controlled anger, "there's more. The beacon recorded everything. Audio, video, biological data. Ambassador Chen was executed in cold blood during a diplomatic meeting." Webb felt something dark and primal rise in his chest, but his voice remained steady. "Show me." The bridge fell silent as they watched Sarah's final moments. The plasma bolt, her body falling. General Thrackmore's casual dismissal of her murder as a lesson for the other delegates. "Those bastards killed a diplomat," growled Commander Jackson, Webb's executive officer. "That's a war crime under every civilized law in the galaxy." "Sir," came another voice from the navigation station, "we can reach the Kepler system in 6 hours if we push the engines to maximum." Webb stared at the screen for a long moment, watching his sister's still form on the chamber floor. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders. These weren't just fellow officers. They were Sarah's friends, too. She had served aboard this very ship for 2 years before joining the diplomatic corps, and there wasn't a soul aboard who didn't remember her laugh echoing through the corridors. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "Admiral Harrison is requesting immediate contact on Priority Channel 1. Webb nodded. "Put him through." Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared on the screen, his expression grim. In the background, Webb could see the bustling activity of Fleet Command. "Marcus, I'm sorry about Sarah. I know this is personal, but I need you to maintain your objectivity." "Understood, sir." "The Korthak have made a serious mistake. They've murdered a human diplomat in front of representatives from 24 worlds. The political ramifications alone could destabilize the entire sector." Webb's hands tightened on his armrests. "What are your orders, Admiral?" "You're the closest ship to the Kepler system. I'm authorizing you to investigate and assess the situation. But Marcus, and I cannot stress this enough, you are not to engage Korthak forces unless directly fired upon. We cannot start a war over this, no matter how justified it might seem. Sir, with respect, they already started the war when they murdered my sister in cold blood." Harrison's expression softened slightly. "I know, son, but we have to be smart about this. The Korthak Empire has conquered 17 systems. They outnumber us 10-1 in this sector. If we go in shooting, we'll just get more humans killed." The transmission ended, leaving Webb alone with his thoughts and the barely contained fury of his crew. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting for the order that would take them into battle against impossible odds. "Set course for Kepler 442b, he said finally. "Maximum burn. And send a message to the rest of the fleet. They're to follow us at best possible speed." "Sir," Jackson said quietly, "the Admiral's orders. We're to investigate and assess." "That's exactly what we're going to do." As the Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system 6 hours later, the bridge crew immediately began scanning for threats. The system was surprisingly quiet, no signs of the massive Korthak fleet that General Thrackmore had threatened to bring. "Passive scans only," Webb ordered. "I want to know everything that's happening on that planet before they know we're here." "Sir," reported Lieutenant Chen at the sensor station, "I'm picking up the Korthak transport ships in orbit around Kepler 442b. 3 heavy cruisers and what looks like a command vessel. They're maintaining standard patrol patterns." "Any sign they've detected us?" "Negative, sir. We're running silent at the edge of their sensor range." Webb studied the tactical display, his mind racing through possibilities. 4 ships against 1 was terrible odds, but the Retribution was built for this kind of fight. Humanity's ship designers had learned from every conflict in their short but violent history, creating vessels that punched far above their weight class. "Communications? Any word from the planet's surface?" "Sir, I'm picking up scattered transmissions. It looks like most of the alien delegations evacuated after the incident, but there are still some Zilani and Mechanical Collective representatives on the surface." "And the Korthak?" "General Thrackmore's forces have occupied the trading post. They've established it as a forward base and are apparently waiting for their main fleet to arrive." Webb nodded grimly. The Korthak were confident enough in their intimidation tactics that they weren't even bothering with heavy security. They expected no resistance after murdering Sarah in front of 24 civilizations. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Sir," Torres called out, excitement creeping into her voice, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Harrison. The entire Fifth Fleet is en route to our position, ETA 18 hours. Webb felt a predatory smile cross his face. Well, it seems the Admiral decided that investigating requires a bit more firepower than initially anticipated. Orders, sir? Webb looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were the men and women who had served with Sarah, who had watched her grow from a young ensign into one of humanity's most promising diplomats. They had all seen the recording of her murder. They all knew what needed to be done. We wait, Webb said. We watch. And in 18 hours, when the Fifth Fleet arrives, we're going to show General Thrackmore exactly what happens when you murder a human diplomat. On the planet's surface, General Thrackmore stood in the converted diplomatic chamber, now serving as his temporary command center. The blood had been cleaned from the floor, and all trace of the morning's unpleasantness had been removed. His communications officer approached with the daily intelligence report. Sir, long-range scanners show no sign of response from any of the species that witnessed today's demonstration. It appears our message was received clearly. Thrackmore nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. Once our reinforcements arrive tomorrow, we'll begin annexing the outlying colonies. The humans will learn that their diplomatic games mean nothing in the face of superior firepower. What he didn't know was that humanity had a very different understanding of diplomacy, and they were about to give him a lesson he would never forget. The morning sun of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the trading post as General Thrackmore reviewed his tactical displays. His 4 ships maintained orbit overhead while his ground forces had fortified the settlement. By all measures, the operation was proceeding perfectly. Sir, his communications officer reported, we've detected several ships entering the system. They're maintaining position at the edge of our sensor range. Thrackmore's interest was piqued, but not alarmed. Specifications? Unknown configuration, sir. The energy signatures don't match any known species in our databases. Probably scavengers hoping to pick through the wreckage after we're done here. Ignore them unless they approach. What Thrackmore didn't realize was that the unknown ships were maintaining a very specific position, exactly at the edge of Korthak's sensor range, but well within their own much more advanced detection systems. Captain Webb and the Fifth Fleet had spent the night planning something that would go down in military history. Aboard the Retribution, Webb stood before a holographic display showing the entire Kepler system. Around him, the fleet commanders participated via secure quantum links from their own ships. 12 heavy cruisers, 4 destroyers, and 2 of humanity's newest dreadnoughts floated in perfect formation. Gentlemen, Webb began, his voice carrying the cold fury that had been building for 18 hours. We are not here for conquest. We are not here for resources. We are here for justice. Admiral Harrison's image nodded from the command link. The diplomatic corps has confirmed that Ambassador Chen was protected under 17 different galactic treaties. Her murder constitutes an act of war not just against humanity, but against the fundamental principles of interstellar law. The Korthak believe that strength comes from fear, Webb continued. Today we teach them that true strength comes from purpose, from unity, from the willingness to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. Commander Jackson brought up the tactical analysis. Sir, intelligence suggests the Korthak are expecting reinforcements, a battle fleet of at least 20 ships. Then we'd better finish this before they arrive. All ships, prepare for combat operations. Remember, we're not just fighting for revenge. Every species in this sector is watching. They need to see that bullies can be stopped. On the planet's surface, Consul Vex 9 of the Mechanical Collective had remained behind when the other delegates evacuated. His quantum processors had been analyzing the situation continuously since Ambassador Chen's murder, and his conclusions were troubling. The Korthak pattern is clear, he transmitted to his hidden allies still on the planet. They eliminate resistance through targeted violence then exploit the fear to expand their territory. If this tactic succeeds here, they will use it everywhere. The small group that had gathered in the ruins of an old warehouse represented what remained of the resistance, a handful of Zelani traders too stubborn to leave their life's work, several Vresh mechanics who maintained the settlement's infrastructure, and a few other species who had nowhere else to go. "The human died for nothing," whispered one of the Zelani, her crystalline form dim with despair. Her words about unity and strength were just words. When the test came, we all stood by and watched. Vex 9's optical sensors focused on her. Perhaps her death was not the end of her message, but the beginning of its true power. High above them, space erupted into chaos. The human Fifth Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect attack formation, their ships materializing less than 50,000 kilometers from the Korthak vessels. It was a textbook example of human military doctrine, overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. "This is Captain Marcus Webb of the United Earth Ship Retribution," came the transmission on all frequencies. "General Thrackmore, you are guilty of murdering Ambassador Sarah Chen, a protected diplomat under galactic law. You have exactly 60 seconds to surrender your forces." Aboard his command ship, Thrackmore stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 18 human warships had appeared from nowhere, and their energy signatures were unlike anything in his database. "How did they get so close without detection?" he roared at his sensor operator. "Unknown, sir. Their stealth capabilities are impressive." Thrackmore's warrior instincts kicked in. 4 ships against 18 was poor odds, but the Korthak had won battles against worse. "All ships, attack formation. Show these humans what happens when they challenge the Empire." The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. The Korthak ships were powerful and well-armed, designed to intimidate through size and raw firepower, but they had been built for conquering defenseless worlds, not fighting an opponent that could hit back. The human ships moved like a pack of predators, their formation flowing and adapting to each change in the battle. Their weapons were precise rather than brutal, disabling rather than destroying where possible. It was a masterclass in tactical superiority. "Korthak command vessel, this is your final warning," Webb transmitted as his ships surrounded the battered enemy flagship. "Surrender now, or be destroyed." General Thrackmore sat in his damaged command center, watching his proud fleet burning around him. 3 of his ships were already drifting hulks, their crews evacuating in escape pods. His own vessel had lost primary power and life support was failing. For the first time in his military career, the great general was forced to speak words that burned in his throat. "Human fleet, this is General Thrackmore. I surrender." The aftermath was swift and decisive. Korthak ground forces laid down their weapons within the hour as human Marines landed at the trading post. But the real victory wasn't military. It was what happened next. Word of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The recording of Ambassador Chen's murder, followed by footage of the human fleet's devastating response, reached every civilized world within days. The message was clear. Humanity would not tolerate the execution of innocents, and they had the power to enforce that principle. Consul Vex 9 stood in the reconstructed diplomatic chamber exactly 1 week later, watching as representatives from 47 different species signed the Galactic Defense Accords. The small memorial plaque where Ambassador Chen had fallen bore a simple inscription: "She stood for all of us." The humans did something remarkable, the Zelani delegate observed, her crystalline form shimmering with renewed hope. They turned one act of brutality into a moment that united half the galaxy. Vex 9's optical sensors focused on the human delegation. Captain Webb had temporarily set aside his military rank to serve as Earth's diplomatic representative, honoring his sister's memory by finishing the work she had started. Ambassador Chen was correct, Vex 9 replied. Strength does come in many forms. Sometimes it's the courage to stand alone against impossible odds. Sometimes it's the wisdom to build bridges between different peoples. And sometimes it's the determination to ensure that those who fall in service of peace did not die in vain. As the signing ceremony concluded, a message arrived from the edge of the system. The Korthak reinforcement fleet had arrived right on schedule, only to find their advance forces in human custody and 47 worlds united against them. After a brief negotiation, they withdrew to Korthak space, their expansion plans indefinitely postponed. That evening, Captain Webb stood alone at his sister's memorial, reading the messages that had poured in from across the galaxy. Families who had lost loved ones to Korthak aggression, worlds that had lived in fear of conquest, diplomats who had never found the courage to speak truth to power. All of them thanked a young human woman who had refused to back down even when facing certain death. "You did it, Sarah," Webb whispered. "Your words did have power after all." The stars above Kepler 442b shone brighter that night, as if the universe itself was celebrating the victory of unity over fear, of justice over brutality, and of hope over despair. And in the years that followed, when young diplomats from a dozen different species faced their own moments of testing, they would remember Ambassador Sarah Chen's last words. "I'm not alone, and I'm not running." Because sometimes the most important battles are won not by those who survive them, but by those who choose to fight them regardless of the cost. And sometimes 7 minutes is all it takes to change the course of galactic history. The human defense fleet had learned something that day too. Their greatest weapon wasn't their advanced technology or superior tactics. It was their absolute refusal to abandon those who stood for what was right, even when standing alone. General Thrackmore, now a prisoner awaiting trial for war crimes, would spend the rest of his life wondering how such a simple plan had gone so catastrophically wrong. He had thought that killing one human would intimidate everyone else. Instead, it had awakened something in humanity that the galaxy had never seen before: the fury of a species that would travel across the stars to avenge a single fallen diplomat. And that, perhaps more than any treaty or alliance, was what truly changed the balance of power among the stars.